was having a chuckle to myself because I'm happy for you to be here too, Kim and Kathleen. I was having a chuckle with myself because I frankly do not wake up in the morning and think, yay, I get to do a Q&A around negative entities. And I was like, you never know what's going to be on your path as a messenger. But I will say that I'm committed to it because, as I explained in the last session, it was really integral. It was so important for my path to understand and to get out of fear around it. For me, I believe that more understanding, more awareness, taking away stigmas, understanding the nuance of negative energy is important, and it can actually be really empowering. So that's my intention with sharing all of the information that I've learned along the way in the School of Hard Knocks. Okay, 2 seconds. All right. Hello, Betsy. And then hello, Sanam. Oh, and thank you, Joyce. Just letting a few more people in. So I'm just gonna start the conversation based on the 3 themes, or the 3 subjects that I wrote in the email, and then we'll just go from there if we have time. Hello, Anahita. Hello, Yana. If we have time to do a couple of questions, we'll take them. But if not, you know what? Maybe I keep going with this conversation because I guarantee there's going to be even more that I could probably unpack. So I like these 30-minute, drop-ins around it. First of all, it's good for my energy. I think something longer might be too much for now, but also I do feel like what happens is I leave we had 30 minutes last week, and then I left, and some people had follow-ups, then more stuff came through to share. So let's just have this continue to be an ongoing conversation. Happy Monday, Monique. Okay, so let's begin. As we move into the Q&A, let's take a moment, because this is kind of the theme of negative energy, and just come back into you, okay? Just maybe take a pause, connect to your breath, and just connect with you, because the more aware you are, the more present you are, the less openings we have in our field. So let's be really present in our body, in our field. There's nothing you have to do that except for to just be. But we have to practice. We have to learn how to just be, because we've been shown and trained to do and to think, right? So let's just be for a moment. Come back in, feel your breath. Connect to the observer in you. The observer in you is the one that notices your thoughts, right? And the observer in you is the one that's like, I'm not gonna feed that thought. I'm just gonna remove my awareness and bring it back to my breath. Okay. Feel the ground your energy. And let's take a nice deep breath in and exhale. And as we begin this conversation, I just share this. If some of you want to take solace in understanding, I have reached a point in my journey where I hold no fear around this topic. I have no fear around negative energy at all, because I've gotten to a point within me, within trust within myself, that there's nothing that could take me off my path. I might meander, a little bit, and, get distracted for a second, but there's nothing. Isn't that funny? I just got distracted. But there's nothing that's gonna, take me to places that don't align with me. And so once you get to that place of knowing and trust within yourself, you're kind of like, okay, entities are annoying. They're not scary. They're more annoying than anything. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, and I accept they're a part of this experience, this human experience. They provide a contrast that our light, as light beings, requests, desires, is interested in exploring, okay, is that contrast. So let's begin. I am recording. So the first thing we want to cover today is children, okay? So yes, I'm going to start off by saying that children in general have very high vibrations. And so if you're looking at negative entities and negative energy through the lens of vibration, you're like, well, they're just naturally high vibrational beings. So how are they getting attachments? Okay. And so I want to just unpack that a little bit because yes, for the most part, most children are high vibrational beings. They haven't been programmed and conditioned away from themselves yet. And again, that's also part of the Earth School too. So we don't have, there's no one to blame for that. But what happens is there are ways that they check out, children check out. Okay. I personally, I'll start with me. I personally struggled with entity attachments as a child. And they actually got significant in high school years. I got very self-destructive in high school years. But as a child, now that I reflect back and now I understand what was happening in a different way, part of it was because I experienced so much trauma as a child that I disassociated. Like it was like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Like what is this experience that I'm in? I'm out, right? So I checked out so much as a child. And so that just left me open. Okay. I wasn't home. So that was one way. The other way was my family patterning, and this is very common, is we swept things under the rug. Okay. We didn't deal with things. We didn't talk about things. There was no like, are you feeling sad? Let's explore that. So I just pushed things down. Okay. And when you push things down as a child, what happens is you create blocks. You create blocks of energy within your field that are stagnant, that are stuck. We call them energy blocks. And when you have those energy blocks, those also create openings. They're vulnerabilities. They're weird. They are spaces within your field that your light is not filling. Okay. You can also think about it as energy blocks, like unprocessed emotions and trauma are places within your field that are frozen. Okay. There's not movement happening. It's dormant. It's stagnant. And so the vibration there is very low. It's like, and so that also creates potentially an energetic match or an opening. Okay. Now, as a child, because I also had a high vibration, I was very connected as a child until I learned that that was not safe for me. And then I shut everything down, all my psychic stuff until my 30s. But as a child with, naturally high vibration, which most children do, the entities or the attachments wouldn't go deep in. Okay. So we have an aura and we have different layers, and maybe it would come in like 7 through 7, 6, 5 and hang out in the peripheries. And then the moment I laughed or the moment I, was a child and carefree, they just popped out. Okay. So I have permission from my son to share this, because he is, I love him and he's a beautiful child and he has absolutely a high vibration and he still gets little gremlins. We call them gremlins. I don't recommend that you do that. Just check in with your own inner guidance. If you even want to talk about it with your children, I share all the time that we do talk about it in this family. And so one thing is we allow him to have screen time. He has like a allocation of time that we try to get him to stick to throughout the week. And part of it is we notice, first of all, the smaller the screen, the more hypnotized he gets by it. okay? The more he loses himself, the less able he is to walk away from it. And anytime someone's going through a hypnotic process, right? Or they are uh they're just kind of losing themselves in whatever they're consuming, there's an opening, right? And so there are times where, we're busy and maybe he's gone a little bit over on screen time and he absolutely comes out with just completely dysregulated and not himself. And there can be a charge behind him and we can see in his eyes, like, we're like, something is in your space. And so he doesn't like me to clear him, which is fine. And so he has his own process and he just closes his eyes and he just claims his space. And again, as a high vibrational being, as a child, it's very easy for them to pop out. Okay. Now, a child doesn't need to even be that aware that, you don't have to use that language with them. They typically can shift pretty fast, right? So the moment you kind of make eye contact with the child and just get them back home, they can start getting back into their center and clearing their energy, okay, without consciously knowing that they're doing that. So that's what I want to share with children. So we want to look at whether or not they're getting dysregulated, right? And that happens through, sugar, that happens through screens, that happens through unprocessed emotions, that happens through feeling disconnected from caregiver. It happens through worry, so all these things you want to check in. And if they're feeling dysregulated, it doesn't always mean, like, if they're dysregulated, it doesn't always mean that they have an attachment. It just means, like, just check it out. And if they feel like they're in a negative, like more self-destructive pattern, maybe they're doing things that are out of character. Maybe it doesn't feel like they're in control, of what's going on. They probably could benefit from a clearing of some type. And now you, as their caregiver, as their guide, you have permission. You have permission to clear their energy without consciously bringing them into it. So I used to do that with Theo before he got to an age where I felt like I could talk to him about it. And it is always better to have him do it, just because it's teaching him to take care of his energy. But there was a point, and I share this, where I create a miniature version of Theo in my hand, and I can just sense, like, I just start, maybe combing some light through his field. And if I'm not using my mind and overthinking, I can be like, oh, there's something feels funny there. Let's clear that out, you know? And you just do that. And it's fascinating. At some point, I've asked Theo if he'd be ever interested in sharing. He's not interested right now, and I actually don't support that at this age. But maybe when he's a little bit older, I'd love for him to share with other children, because he can feel a difference after he clears, like, immediately. He's like, oh, I feel back to me. So that's just always a confirmation for him, to that, okay, there's other, and then there's me. All right. So that's another thing. Let me see what else can happen. Parents. Okay. So children, we have a cord to our children, and it's important. And it's connected to the first chakra. All right. And it gives them a sense of grounding, a sense of placement as they're kind of learning about themselves. Some of the most confident kids are those who can actually um, um, share. How am I explain this? Some of the more confident kids who feel the safest are able to leave their parents' side. Does that make sense? Because that cord is very strong and their parents are very grounded, so they can kind of explore and they don't have to feel like they're by their parents' side all the time. Okay. When that happens, sometimes, and it's going to change case by case, the child feels like the parent is not safe. So they are trying to soothe the parent. Maybe the parent's not feeling grounded, and so they're trying to just stay with the parent. And that's where kind of codependence starts happening, child caretaking the adult. But if the parent is really ungrounded, and this is not, by the way, this is not another reason why we need to feel ashamed as parents, okay? It is what it is. Oftentimes, like I can speak personally, I was not very present at the first couple of years of Theo's life. It was bringing him, me having him as a child brought up so much trauma for me as a kid that I had to work through all of that in his first couple of years. So I was not the most present mom. Okay. So this is not something that I'm interested in making people feel ashamed about. It's just the more you're aware of it, the more you can do something about it, which is the more present and grounded you are, the more present and grounded energy you're sending to your child. And if you're very ungrounded, that also can interrupt their well-being, their sense of safety, and that can create openings as well. Okay. So that's another thing to explore. And then one other piece to this, sometimes family systems have entities. um, Lineage. Like it's just a lineage of suffering, of low self-esteem, of negativity, of addiction, of abuse. Okay. And so sometimes, and this is like those of us who are, we're cycle breakers. We're cycle breakers. So I'm breaking cycles right now by becoming more present and dealing with my stuff. But I'm still doing that. So like Theo is benefiting from it as I'm doing it, but also, he's a part of this family lineage. So there's sometimes to be aware of that too, which is why this is also a very personal choice, but and I probably will do a whole segment around this about needing to leave family members when they're taken over. Okay. Because you're probably in that web. And it's not until you can break free from it and start to learn who you are and actually really start strengthening your energy. Yes, being a cycle breaker is exhausting. We'll say it's a not one of the easier life schools. Okay. Um, but it's important, it's incredibly important, and it helps those in the past and it helps those in the future as well. Absolutely. So back to cycle break. So just being aware, sometimes entities can come into children through like the family cycle, and that maybe at some point you might need to walk away from the family just to get back into your own energy field, just to connect to who you authentically are. And then when you feel strong enough, maybe or maybe not, you can play around with interacting with family members. But that's, again, a very personal choice, and there's no judgment around it. So again, everyone is probably aware that my mom passed away in end of December or middle of December. And we're just now starting a new relationship because I could not have a relationship with her in human form. She wasn't as present as, and it wasn't safe for me. So we talk about it now, and she totally gets it. And she now is starting, it was hard for her to understand, but she really can see now why I needed to step back from the relationship. And when we're here in the 3D, this gets really sticky because there's so much judgment. I had so many people judging me. Like, how could you walk away from your mom? Like all these things, you're selfish. And I had to just drown it out. And that process of me drowning it out and listening to my truth made me even stronger. Okay. So there's that piece. Now, I think that's about it. So just remember this for kids, that oftentimes if there is an attachment, it doesn't go deep in. For us adults, what happens is the entities or attachments, remember on that 10-point scale, even if it's like a 5 or a 6, which is not as, what's the word? Intrusive, we'll say, as 7, 8, 9, 10. But even those little guys, they can get into your chakra system. And then all of a sudden you have a chakra imbalance, and and then you're feeding this cycle. And so figuring out, again, back to what I said in the first session, the most important thing you can do is just take control of your life. Like finding that balance of, working with the universe, but also taking responsibility. Because the moment you start taking responsibility, you start stepping in your power, and then you start raising your vibration, and it starts making it less of an energetic match for whatever's in your field. So there's never an instance, and I will say this, there may be other teachers or people who look at this differently. This is from my lens, okay? This is not only from my life experience, but also what has been shared with me. There's never an experience where you have an entity attachment and there's nothing you can do. It's never an excuse to say, all right, like I have to go through this whole life with attachments. No, never, never. They're here, and they're a part of us because we're still strengthening ourselves and claiming back our light, remembering we are the light. The more we remember, the more we raise our vibration, the more that, we starve lower patterns within our life, the more we walk away from negativity, from toxicity, the more we raise our vibration, the less energetic match. How do you know if a child has an entity attachment? Yeah, so, and again, this is going to be case by case, but a few things. One, you can sometimes see it in their eyes, like they just don't look there, like they're like having an outburst, they're having a reaction, and they're not home, and it feels like they're not in control. And that can be an indication. Now, again, dysregulated is a little tricky because every time they're dysregulated does not mean that they have an entity attachment, okay? However, if you notice, like for a whole afternoon, they're not feeling like themselves, maybe they will wake up the next morning and they're not like themselves, they probably have some, like fleas, we call them. They probably have fleas in their space that they need to clear. And if they're being really self-destructive, okay? Like they want to hurt themselves, they want to hurt other people. How do I deal with family attachments that are trying to act on me? It's so strong. Yes. So I understand this. And this is, let me just kind of ground myself in how I want to answer this, just because there's a lot of different ways to go about this. When we have family, when we're kind of part of that familial pattern of negativity, and the best thing to do is continue to choose yourself. And when I say that, it can be hard to work with family because there's so many, sorry, there's so many people coming through. So there's so many invisible things happening with family. Okay. And so for instance, if you choose to stay, if you have negative attachment with family members, sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, you have to physically walk away. Okay. Because you have to reset. You have to do like a hard reset to know who you are outside of that family system. Does that make sense? And again, I'm very sensitive about ever telling people they need to walk away from family. So make sure that, you check in. But if you decide to stay in engagement, you're going to have to really up your energy hygiene. Like there's there's a call coming through and it's your mom, and every time she makes you feel guilty, you feel like crap, you walk out of there deflated every time that conversation, she criticizes you, all these things. Then if you choose, and that's your choice, right? If you choose to answer that phone call, then do the energy hygiene protocol, which is get really present in your body, feel your feet, get grounded, occupy your own space, maybe take a few breaths, and then shields up. Okay. Answer the call. Blah, 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 blah. Stay really centered. try not to agree to any negativity, hang up, and then I clear and release whatever's not me. Okay, so you have to be so conscious when you're dealing with people with attachments. And it's exhausting, right? Because you have to be on it. You have to be on it, but that is the alternative to walking away. Does that make sense? For extremely sensitive people, how do you think past lives and or agreements affect picking up attachments? I've been seeing clearing those out really help, but I'm curious what you think. Okay. So yes, so we can come in. Okay, let me try to explain this. Oh, wait, it's almost 2 o'clock. We'll have to do another one of these. So I used to do past life regressions and readings, and then I stopped doing them. And it's not because it's not helpful to know, oh, in a past life, this happened to you. But I did notice that people would just get really stuck in the intellectual of the story and the identity and not realize that it's an invitation for you to change that pattern today, and that you're creating a very similar scenario, your higher self is, so that you can break through it. So really, we can clear all past life stuff without having to know our past life stuff. Because trust me, if it's still a challenge in your life, it's there for you to use your free will and self-responsibility to change that pattern. Okay. So with in terms of coming in, so what happens is, like, let's say I had a past life where I was abusive, I was a man and I was physically abusive to my wife, and I was holding those patterns, those energetic patterns in my field. It would probably be, something to do with like a overactive, it would probably be an overactive solar plexus where I got too much into ego and control, and probably an underdeveloped heart where I was not in my heart, right? And looking at people as possessions and whatnot. Now, when I come into this life, unless, you do a lot of healing in between, which for the most part we can, but we usually still, like, you still need to work it out in human life. Okay. So you're going to come back in maybe with a lighter degree of those same patterns of an overactive solar plexus and an underdeveloped heart. Okay. And then all of a sudden, you'll start getting in similar dynamics. And it's up to you to be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to control people. I don't want to misuse my power. I don't want to be aggressive. I want to be more sensitive to this. And I start taking the steps to come back into balance. Okay. Okay. So let me just look. How can we clear our kids of high level energies? Can we? Okay, sorry, I understand the question. Not high frequency, like this on the higher part of the scale for entities. Okay, so that one is a little tricky. So I did talk about family members, right? So if we have like close friends, family members, teens, right? Because teens can run some pretty significant heavy energy, personal experience here. And part of it, okay, so there's a lot of different ways to answer this. Part of it is, for instance, I was and I am a light worker, okay? And when I say light worker, it doesn't mean anything other than I have a purpose here to remember my light. And in doing so, it reminds people of their own light. And it's a very specific path, right? It's very much about becoming more conscious. Now, there's light workers in different ways, artists, musicians, but like this specific light worker who's really here for the mission of consciousness, oftentimes will have to go through the school of dark entities. They will actually, it's part of their training. Okay. So it is not a coincidence that I understand entities so well, because it was through that process and getting back into my power, taking responsibility, and also becoming not afraid of them. I'm just not afraid of them anymore. That now here I am willing to talk about it with people. And so I say that because even as a teen, you have to zoom out, and it might be part of their path to understand entities, and it might be part of their path to and it because they have a highlight, right? It might be part of them, their higher self, trying to get them, encourage them to strengthen their light through working through the entity, like working the entities out of their life. Okay.